What's up, everyone? Welcome to YouTube and welcome back to the show. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our sponsor for today's episode.
Most sports have designated coaches for the most important movements. Basketball players have shooting coaches, baseball players have batting coaches, and golfers have swing coaches.
Now, for the first time, we have a specific coach for one of the most important movements in volleyball.
If you use code ARMSWING50 at checkout, you'll instantly get 50% off your first month of the Armswing Academy.
Once you're inside the app, you can upload a video of your arm swing. Then you'll get personalized feedback direct from Nick Del Bianco. He'll give you some tips on how your arm swing is looking. Then you get some on-court exercises to lock in the new patterns, and even a specific weight room program to help you spike harder and play pain-free.
If you're not sold yet and you just want to test it out, all you got to do is follow the link in the description of this episode or our Instagram bio and sign up for the 7-day free trial. Then use code ARMSWING50 at checkout and get 50% off the first month after the trial.
All righty, and we're live. Welcome back, everyone, to the Pit to Pro podcast. Thank you, Stephen, for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, boys.
Yeah, this is really, really awesome. I like to start these things off on kind of a personal note. You've played a huge role in the development of both Matthias and I's career. Oog's not here today. He had toe surgery yesterday, so he's a little MIA. Yeah. But I want to remember a story. It was our first summer kind of on the A team, training with the A team. And you took me, Tias, Brody, and Sam Cooper out for dinner. And you said, "Hey, I'm paying for the whole thing. Let me tell you about pro life. Let me tell you what you need to do to get to the next level." You gave us all the stories, all the inside scoops. And I really remember that. I love that dinner. But my question, I guess, is where do you find the time and energy to give back to the younger generation, to share your experiences? Because you're obviously a very busy person. You obviously have your own stuff you got to deal with. But where does that come from? And then maybe who in your life did that to you where you were like, oh, that's important, I got to give it back?
I remember kind of running around like a chicken with my head's cut off for my first summer on the national team when I was maybe 21, and like the next closest guy was TJ, but he'd already been on the team for maybe 2, 3 years. And there was a huge generation of older guys who I had watched in Champions League, guys who were like early 30s. And I remember realizing that most of them were going to retire. And I was like trying to ask questions about everything all the time. And I knew it was bothering them, but so I would just like disperse my questions among like 7 or 8 guys who would actually talk to me. And I remember in between, like, I was like trying to make myself useful, and I was like spotting Fred Winters on bench, asking him about taxes. And I was like, man, if I can just, pick up the weights for this guy and then I can just ask him a couple questions about what you do about your taxes, then probably he won't get that like irritated with me. And like I feel like there's such a better way to do these things. And a lot of the guys coming up, like there's not a ton of like ready available information about volleyball, and the things that you are like prefaced with the national team or your university experience is very different than what you're going to experience, especially depending on where you play and the different cultures that you find yourself in. So I think just trying to give people a realistic expectation um, is a lot better than just like, okay, guys, you'll figure it out. Because I think one of the things that actually has happened with a lot of like young Canadian players, I think they have an idea of what being a professional is in their mind, and we have a pretty high rate of burnout of like guys taking contracts for like their first couple of years and then just stopping to play. And I think that also just deals with like their expectations of what they think is going to be. And it might be that thing, but just maybe 5 or 6 years into the career. And your first couple of years are going to be a lot more difficult than that. And I think if some people can kind of share some of that information, it might actually ease the burden and ease them into it.
I love that answer because that's one of the reasons we started this podcast was to, like Tia said, I think in our first episode, no one told him any of the things he wanted to know. So this is us trying to share our experiences and bring on guests that share their experiences. I think you're the perfect person for that. So we're really fired up to have you on here and talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd
Thanks,
love
guys.
to dive into like what are some of the common things that people get wrong about being a professional and having that long career overseas? And then what are some of the common, let's say, character traits of those that do survive for the long haul overseas?
Um, I'm gonna give kind of a hybrid answer here. I think when you kind of break it down, you can understand that most of your time is spent not in the gym, you know, and I think that is one of the things that you really do have to get right. Um, because if your whole self-worth, whole self, your day revolves around one training, and I think you guys know kind of with all of your experience that if your whole thing revolves around one training and then that training goes bad, what is your day like? Like what is your vision of how a day went? And it's usually if the training was great, then things are as you expected. Things are as it seems. Like I'm doing well, I'm progressing my career, I'm getting better as a player. Go team. If things do not go well, then you're kind of sitting there like, oh man, this this kind of sucks. I can't really talk to anyone who's like around me. I don't really have any friends. Oh man, my family's at Thanksgiving. And then imagine you have another bad trip. You're like, oh, what am I doing here? Like, this sucks. Then you can kind of start to find yourself spiral. So I think kind of finding what works for you as an individual and having like the self-awareness to actually experiment with, okay, is sunlight important to me? Is getting outside, going for walks, is socializing important to me? Is making sure I get a good sleep or playing some video games with my buddies back home important to me? Like, and I think as I've gotten older, a lot of these things, I used to think things were kind of in would fit into one groove, like one path was the same path for everybody. And then I realized that everybody's very different, and what might be downtime for me is not downtime for another person. And I think that's kind of the individual self-awareness piece that you have to kind of have going into it. And yeah, I think guys can really have a good awareness of that when they start, and then it's a lot easier than having a problem and trying to fix a problem at the same time.
Yeah, that's cool.
That
It's almost like this concept we talked about a couple times, about like separating you as a person from you as a player and making sure that things, there's obviously going to be some leakage, let's call it, of how your performance is onto your life. I think that's inevitable, but
Yeah.
try finding like who you are outside of the game is like a big important thing, especially playing pro, because it can be a harsh environment sometimes, when things aren't going well overseas.
Yeah, like I guess the other thing too that is starts to interfere sometimes with your joy of the game is you realize there's a dollar value on you now. And that's like something that I personally had a really tough time with struggling with, is knowing that someone out there decided to pay an X amount of dollars for me to represent this team, to play on this team, and maybe an X amount of dollars for someone else to play on this team. And like, oh, like you're more valuable than me. Like, and it kind of does start to take away from a lot of like club-based sports, university-based sports, maybe now with the NCAA getting some money. Okay. Now this is a pretty new thing. But for most of like youth sports, it's like everybody's the same on the team, everybody's just as valuable, and like all for one, one for all. And then you kind of start to realize like there's a bit more of a mercenary life in professional volleyball, and people are kind of out for contracts, and there's a dollar amount on your head, and like that was something that weighed on me of trying to separate the two. It actually really forced me to actually look inwards and to find things that were good for me as a person, and kind of to separate myself from the actual professional that goes into the gym every single day.
what do you believe now that or what did you used to believe about volleyball at the beginning of your career that you no longer believe?
I think in the beginning, I really I didn't really have a set of principles that I could really kind of like right the ship with. And so I think when things were starting to get difficult, it would be okay for me to start to question all of my skills or start to question like all of my approach to a game. And then I think once you start to have rituals and routines, and in professional life, you really can control all aspects of your life, and more so than in a university setting, then you can start to play with things that can become almost crutches to a degree. Like I need to not leave my house the day of the game because I need to just nap and just focus and just do this and do. And then you start to realize like maybe one time something was out of your control. Let's say your grandmother's in town and you're hanging out with your grandma because she's there. And then you have a great game and you realize, oh wow, like did I actually need to do all that stuff? And then you can start to pick apart the actual processes that are like, well, I can probably come to a medium ground. Like I probably don't want to be out all day, but like going out and having a coffee and talking to a buddy on the team and then coming back home actually breaks up my day nicely, and that's actually something nice for me. Um, but I think when you're early in your career, you start to overanalyze. Like if you're someone like me, like, oh, I had a bad performance. Let me just overanalyze every single thing I did leading up to that. And maybe there was something good, maybe there was something bad, and maybe I can tie down to this happened. And you kind of take away from the fact that like our game is a game that's built on errors, and realistically, someone else can just be playing great, and that might just be why you lose. And might not be like you could come out with an B plus performance, which isn't bad, but someone else had an A plus night, and you know what? You're just probably not going to beat that person on that night. So you can start to realize things a little bit more about your own life like that.
That's really cool. The grandma thing, I had the exact same thing last year. Exact same. I was like, yeah, I need to be in bed. I got to eat this for pregame meal,
Yeah.
whatever. And then my mom's uncle, who lives in Germany, came to watch the game, and he came at like 2 o'clock. Game was at 8. So I didn't get to nap. I like made dinner and stuff. We chatted like broken English. I'm like, oh man, this was before the Arcus game. And then we beat Arcus in the golden set. I played great, got the MVP. I was like, oh, all right. Like it's just volleyball. I didn't forget how to do it, like
Yeah.
yeah, that's cool. That's a cool answer that you said.
I would ask
I
you, like, one of the cool things about something like that is then when you take a step back after you've been playing for a little while, you can actually ease back on the over analysis of like things. And you actually start to enjoy, like, do you start to enjoy the game a bit more when you really have a set idea of, on my absolute worst, I'm going to perform probably about like this, and my absolute best, I'll probably perform somewhere around here. And most of the time, I'll be somewhere in the middle. I found that to be a really like comforting thing. It's like, oh, like my peaks and valleys are not so high and low now. And like,
mm,
oh, I can actually like enjoy the sport a bit more as opposed to being like, oh, come on, just be a good one tonight. Just
yeah,
go.
yeah,
Let me
yeah.
just do every single thing right to
Yeah,
be a good
yeah.
one tonight.
Yeah, no,
Mhm.
100%, 100%. And actually, something Graham Vigrass said when he was on the podcast, he was talking about it doesn't matter. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Worst can
Yeah.
happen is I get subbed out after 8 points, but I had a great lunch with my great uncle. I got some relationship time. I got some people time. I got to play in front of a huge crowd, and the day goes on tomorrow. Like that has been really liberating for me as well. It's like, it doesn't really matter, really. Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. And I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah. I've listened to a lot of your guys' episodes with a lot of the guys. So
Cool.
I'm right along
Cool.
here with you. I've
Yeah.
been learning from some of my old
Cool.
teammates that I don't get to talk to as much anymore now. So it's great.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, you mentioned there quickly about, you said for a guy like me at one point, and
Yeah.
I think that like where you're going with that is that you're one of the most dialed, analytical, like process based people that I know. You're you have like the level of discipline you have to control as much of what goes into your body, what the exercise you do, how you approach the court, all that stuff is like no one I've ever seen. So I want to move into like a team dynamics thing, and I'm wondering if it bothers you when there's people who don't don't have that same mindset and don't approach the game that way.
Oh man. So I know some of this stuff is gonna be amazing to share. So one of my roommates, sorry, my roommate now on the road is Uroš Kovacevic. And Uroš, now we're pretty good buddies. So I'm gonna share two stories. So I played firstly against Uroš in the under 21 World Championships in Izmir 2012, something like that. Uroš was already on the national team playing in Modena, but was still like now playing. They just wanted to do well at the under 21 World. So they sent Uroš and a couple of the other guys who were already on the A team, but they're like, no, you go play this too. So Uroš is there, and I like know who this guy is. And he obviously has no idea who we are. And I see like we coming down from video the like night before the game, and he's up with the coaching staff, just having some ciggies, just drinking a little bit, having a blast. Like something that like when you're not 20, like can you imagine like going up with your coaches having ciggies, just drinking before the night before a game in the World Championships? Like I was like, what is going on here? He like destroyed us the next day. It was amazing. And then now on our team, like you couldn't find two guys who are so different. Like if Uroš is like quite professional and like when there is a competitive thing in practice, like he is all in, like he's dialed in, like loves that. But if there's other stuff, okay, I'm just warming up, I'm getting it going, like it's fine. Weight room, same thing. If it says 6 sets of 3 at this weight, I do 6 sets of 3. I don't do 4. I don't do 5. I don't warm, like it's just this is what I'm doing. And it's pretty funny to me because now if you would ask me this question before I'd met someone like that who's just gifted, I would have said it frustrates me if you're not performing. If you're performing, I'm not going to say anything. What I would say personally is that I'm not a gifted player. Like I have a good arm swing. I don't have the best arm swing you've ever seen. I have decent like body genetics to be, but I'm not the lightest, like most physically genetically gifted player. I'm not the best passer you've ever seen. I'm not this, I'm not that. But the one thing that I do try and meticulously kind of work through is like how do I achieve the most out of what I have? And um and I think you've seen that side of me a bit more because in pro versus in national team, in pro, it's a bit more transient. Like you're not maybe trying to invest in someone for 4 years. Like, whereas if you see a young guy in national team and you're looking at him and you're like, hey, like I know how much someone's words meant to me when I was you, because you can literally put yourself back in those shoes because we all kind of come up through the same situation. Then you can kind of look at that moment and be like, I'll go watch the B team practice for an extra 15 minutes out of my day. And I might say one thing to someone who looks like they have what it takes to come to the next level. And I think coming out of Canada, like a lot of the stuff that you guys are aware of is there's not a lot of people who are exceptionally gifted at the sport, just based on how we all grew up in the models that we train under. And technically our nation is not gifted. But the one thing that is quite different about us is that we do really lean into the work side of things. And so I think there's a lot of stuff that you can squeeze out of yourself in that regard. So in national team, I'm a lot more particular in what I would say.
I have a question about um skills. Let's take volleyball skills, strength and conditioning skills, and mental skills. If you were to make a pie chart percentage wise for you, what's the most important? Would it be 33% across the board, or is one more important than the other? Or what do you think about that?
Are you talking me now, or are you talking if I was to
Um,
develop a volleyball player?
that's a great question. Let's go if you were to develop let's say you had a son, 13 years old, getting into volleyball. Where would
Mm.
you urge.
Ooh, I've never thought about this before. Um, I think it grows as you grow. Um, I'll break you through a timeline. If you can develop great movement patterns at an early age, you're going to excel at almost all sports. How you move, like literally, you can watch some people who move effortlessly, move beautifully. They have no negative movement. They know how to control their legs. They know how to control unilateral portions of their body. They can learn skills very fast. So on a strength and conditioning thing, that's I would consider that to be part of it. And if you can ingrain motor patterns at a young age that are optimal, you're great. Technically, volleyball is, as you are aware, it's an incredibly technical sport. If your left foot is arced out from a place of like parallel here to here, when you're passing a ball on your left side, your hip is then going to open, your shoulder is then going to open. And when the ball arrives at somewhere over 105, 110 kilometers an hour, the ball is going to just skid off your platform because you don't have the actual time and the eye capability to move the ball. So if you learn the wrong motor pattern technically as well, there's just going to be a ceiling on how good you can be. Those are things I'm trying to unlearn at the moment. So it's kind of fun on that moment. And I think one of the things that I've always attributed is you can't change who you are off the court versus who you are on the court. So you can kind of manipulate, you can kind of bring out certain or emphasize certain parts of your personality and things that make you tick and maybe you don't show very often. But if you are an undisciplined, for example, if you're an undisciplined and really short to anger person outside of the court, that will come out, but it's not going to come out in a training. It's not going to come, it's going to come out in the exact intense moments where your true character arrives when it's
When you don't want it
2022.
to.
Yeah. And it's going to come out maybe in a moment where it's not your best buddy who makes a mistake. It's someone that's kind of been on your nerves all week. And then you're going to see who you really are. And those are the moments that are tough because other people are going to see who you really are. And so I think in the mental side of things, you really need to work on a holistic approach to change these things if you want to. And I think in a full summary is you can be as good as you want to be, but it's a matter of if you want to. And you can say you want to do a lot of things in this sport or say you want to go to the Olympics or you can say you want to get a full scholarship. But it really, there is nothing in exchange of the place of doing. What do you do? So I'm going to give a terrible answer and just say 33% all the way. But if it was my kid,
That was a beautiful answer.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
It would start with probably 60% strength conditioning for my kid, and then like 30% mental, and then 10% technical. Because I'm not the most technically gifted guy, but that kid would be an absolute monster.
I want
That's
to
awesome.
dive into the mental side of things a little bit and what has changed for you over the years. I think what's tough about building mental toughness and performing under pressure is that you get like maybe 2 reps a year at learning to play under pressure. Like you play an entire U Sports season, and then the moment where
Yeah.
there's actually pressure, where your season's on the line, it happens maybe once or twice in the Ken West playoffs and once in nationals or something. And then whatever, a whole
Yeah.
national team somewhere. Every match is important, but when there's true pressure on and you need to perform at your best to win a championship or to not get relegated or something like that, the
Yeah.
opportunities are so rare. So I'm wondering how you maybe used to approach those moments, some things that you noticed from those experiences, and then how that's changed how you approach them now.
Um, I'll share a quick story. I like stories to understand things. So
Yeah, I love
um,
it.
we were doing the 20, It was for the 2020 Olympics. And we went to an Olympic qualification in China. Um, I was someone who's kind of coming off the bench, sometimes starting, but I was at this moment, I was the third on our national team. And we went into that tournament, and I remember the second side was getting absolutely destroyed by the starting six. The starting six were just they were immaculate. They're impressive. It was incredible what they were doing. And I went into the games like, oh man, we got this. Like this is ours. Like this is done. We're going. No chance. And I was so overconfident in other people that I kind of missed the boat, and I didn't naturally prep myself actually to perform in the way that I had to. And generally the way I approached coming off the bench was always, hey, if I don't go in, we win. That's the only way I don't go in. Like, no worries, we win. But if I do go in, we win because I'm gonna make a change. I'm gonna give some good energy. We're gonna win this game. So like either way we win. Great. Go team. And I didn't approach it like that. And two guys had a really two guys did not perform at the level that they had been performing at. And and I went in and I had a good game. I didn't have one of those games where I was like, oh, we're gonna win. And I felt it. And I felt like I didn't prepare it. And I remember feeling that disappointment and realizing and crying. I was crying on the bus ride home because I realized I had put as much faith into other people and the things that were outside of my control. And I hadn't done what I needed to do with the things that were inside of my control. And that was a really good moment for me. And it kind of elicited a response that is similar to what you had mentioned before, Tias. Like I did not drink. I weighed my food for the next 4 months. And every single time I could have touched a ball, in addition to what was required in practice, I did. Every single day I did extra weights. Every single time it was built around there was one qualifier coming up. It was in Vancouver in January to play. And I knew we'd be playing against a really good Cuba team. And I had watched that same qualifying game happen before the Rio Olympics, where we were playing in Edmonton and they had destroyed the team in like maybe 50 minutes. Now I remember also being so sad watching that. So I knew kind of what was at stake, kind of what was on the line, and I knew how I felt. And I remember we had lost the first two sets in Vancouver against Cuba. And I remember an incredible sense of calm and presence of mind of, okay, like there is, because in those moments, every negative thought, oh, I wish I could have, oh, maybe if I had passed a couple more reps, I would feel better right now. Or maybe I would have, if I was 3 kilos lighter, I'd be blocking higher. And if like any of these things, and I had actually hurt my back, so I hadn't trained the week before that at all. And that would have been the first thing that would have set me off. Like, oh, I didn't train this week. Oh man, like how am I going to be able to play? And some guys came off the bench, and we were able to turn that game around. And I remember feeling the exact same way emotionally through the entire game after losing the first two sets at your Olympic dream at home. And that was one of probably maybe the only times in my no, one of the only times in my life that I've been proud of myself. Like truly to your core, like I am so proud of like you had a moment where something didn't go very well and you took the responsibility and the ownership of your own actions to change something, and you were put back into a similar situation more difficult that you probably would have crumbled, and you did not. So I think self-reflection and writing about those moments are important. because in the moment you have all of the emotion, you have all of the truth and all of the reality coming at you. And if you can write that, you can put yourself back into those moments in your mind's eye. But if you think back to what something was, like if you think back, imagine to a breakup, imagine you think back to a breakup 2 years ago. You think back like, oh yeah, that kind of sucked, but whatever. But like during that time, it was horrendous, and you have all the emotion to make a change, and it's just a choice if you make that change or not. Um, and kind of like that in those moments, like we didn't qualify for the Olympics in that first round, and you had all the emotion to make a change and do something about it, but you need to intellectually, emotionally, and like soulfully be put on the same page. So, um, I don't know if that answers the question
That
exactly.
gave me goosebumps. That
Yeah.
was awesome.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
unreal, Steve. I remember watching that game. I
Yeah.
was in maybe my whatever first year, maybe first year, second year.
It was my third year. And we moved the game. Like Ken West moved the game
Yeah,
to like 2 p.m. so that we could all go to
yeah.
Vancouver to
That's pretty
watch.
sick.
And I
That's
still
nice.
that was to this day the best volleyball match I've ever seen in my life. And like I was so proud to be Canadian in that
Yeah.
moment and watch you guys perform. And like now hearing the backstory to that even more so. I think I saw on Instagram the other day, it was Karch Karai talking about what separates like the good from the great, especially in volleyball. And he said it's response to failure. And I think you had a failure, let's say, in that China qualifier, and your response was like over the moon positive. And I think that is what leads you to those moments where you can actually perform. And I think it's cool what you're saying about kind of the serenity you had under pressure. Do you think that was a result of knowing that you did everything you could have to prepare yourself for that moment?
Yeah, I think it's the exact moment of like pure flow state. Is there was no reality, there was no moment that you could have looked back or like that little devil on your shoulder, like, oh, that was the day where you didn't do this or you cut reps here. Like there was no moment of that. And when you realize that there's everything you did to the best of your ability, and then there's an emptiness of that like negative self-talk. And I'm not saying that I've achieved this very often since then. And I don't know if I'll ever achieve it again, because I don't know if I'm willing to do what I was willing to do at the time to achieve it, if that makes sense. But it is probably one of the most special things that I've felt. And to do it with people that you truly love, and to people who you saw at a moment of, everybody knows what the odds are in that moment. Everybody knows. Um, and you see it in your friend's eyes, and then you are able with them to claw it back from that. Like, yeah,
I think a
man.
cool part about that responding to failure and maybe an overlooked part is really being emotionally honest with yourself. And like you said, you were crying on the bus afterwards because you were so distraught. And I think that's really important. And I think it's important to sit with that feeling and like sit in that discomfort and be like, why did that upset me so much? Why am I feeling this way? And then you can make the choices that are going to lead you to being like, I don't want to feel that way again. So what do I have to do? But if you skip that part, it might not be as beneficial in the long run.
Yeah. When I was young, forget where it came from, but someone explained the idea of, if you like push away feelings and you push them down, you're going to go without them eventually. Eventually, you're just not going to get that feeling anymore. So if you push away sadness, if you push away regret, if you push away despair, even though they're not enjoyable to feel at the time, then they're just going to get buried and buried and buried, which in some respects, some people might say is good. But I think what I personally want is to like to live a full human experience and to live an experience where you have the full spectrum of human emotion, because everyone knows after 3 days of rain, that first sunny day is like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned in both sides of the coin, and you can take what you want. But I think what you said is really important, especially in today's day and age, because now there's so many ways to distract yourself from feeling that way, of actually sitting in silence and letting your, I'm going to call it, you can call it your conscience, your soul, whatever, but letting that inner voice actually speak to you, because there is so much wisdom that you already know what the problem is. You already know why you felt the way you felt. And it's listening and just coming to terms with it. And I think in those moments of emptiness and those moments of silence, you can get real inspiration. And I think you have a moment and choice to act in those moments. And yeah, and they're special. They don't come all the time.
This is so cool. We have so many questions for you, but I kind of wanted to stay on this path, because everyone, let's say in TD Place in Ottawa, they're watching you as behemoth of a man, lots of emotion, but no one really gets to see the failures behind and the emotion behind it and get to know you. And so I'm curious about if there's other failures, or can you tell us about some other failures you've had and what you've learned from them throughout your career thus far?
That would probably be the best resounding one. I think yeah, I think that would probably be the best resounding one, if I'm honest with you. It's the best one I have prepared
I
for you
appreciate
guys.
the honesty.
Well, what was cool about this Karch Karai clip too is like it's not just about the big ones. Like volleyball is a sport of failure. Every time you don't score a point, the other team scored a point. So
Yeah.
you fail like so many times throughout a match. And it's also that response to failure that is so critical for a high performer, and just staying present, moving on from those micro failures faster and having a positive response to that as well, not just waiting until you lose a final or you don't qualify, and those big things. That just the resilience of like moment to moment, even moving on from those.
Yeah. And I think a lot of how you deal with that, like for me personally, like I think a lot of people, you can also kind of see like how your day is going before you head into the gym for practice. Like if you've been super like short-tempered or super like you didn't sleep well and you're already like frustrated and irritated, you kind of know what you're going to get in the moments where someone starts pushing it. Like you, someone just didn't set that ball a little close enough on a high ball, and you're like, but you realize like it starts to like also, you can start to spiral in those micro failures as well. Like in the same way, like you can really start to think like, man, why are people not just delivering better? And then you can start to realize like, do I ever set intentionally bad? Have I ever
Yeah.
tried to do that? It's like no. And I think those responses to failure, yeah, they can say a lot about you as a person, and it really does speak a lot to your team cohesion of, can someone also speak to you in those moments? So I think um, you've been in the gym when Brett's kind of come to me a couple of times and been like, kind of called me out on my behavior or called me out on my reactions to things. I think especially when you're looking at the situation where you have someone who can be honest with you and someone who can kind of call you out in those moments, especially when you're not in a place of self-awareness, when you're not at your best, then those are the moments where when you're going to a spare or when you go into a final, the team chemistry really can help you out. As if you're being honest with people and you care enough about people, you can pull someone out of that just by really kind of giving a hard reset of being like, hey man, like, what are you doing? Like, that's not, that's not what you want to be doing right now. Like, that's not how you want to be treating people, or that's not how you want to be acting. Like, come on. And like, the small parts of a team that those moments when they're not done, it removes a bit of team culture. And when they are done, you can lean into those moments where that actually strengthens the team. And from the outside, you might look at that being like, whoa, there's conflict in this team. It's like, no, but it's necessary at those moments. It's necessary to not let that thing slide. It's necessary to kind of dive and push in and lean into that. And yeah, those small failures in the day-to-day, those are the things that are the building blocks for those big moments as well as a team in that context.
I really want to dive into this team dynamics part because that's one thing about you that stood out to me for the couple of years that we played with is your capacity to be honest with me, especially, and to tell me how you saw it. And yeah, just the honest truth about what you're seeing in my behavior or the teammates' behavior, what's going on within the team. And I think that's something that I always struggled with. I was a get my job done guy. Like I was always focused on myself, doing the best I could, and didn't really I was never comfortable having those tough conversations. How can someone like myself learn to have those conversations?
Um, there's a book our sports site gave us during the Olympic run, Kyle Pickett. It was about radical candor. Um, it was something that spoke about I'm going to take two steps back here. If you look at your personality and you start to see what areas that you're comfortable in, and you start to look at people on the team and how people A, receive information and B, give information, and then you start to look at the people who are responsive enough to actually receive information and make the most of it. And then you look at your sphere of influence of people that if I said something to them, they would actually listen. You can start to like identify a couple of key people. And if I'm being brutally honest, you're going to look at also people who it's worth investing in. So you're going to probably take a lot of these factors and in team dynamics, like if it's you who's looking into those moments, you're a bit more shy about these things. The easiest thing to do is to have one conversation. And it's like just one conversation, it's like something you don't want to do. It's just, in the back of your mind, this guy is sitting beside you every single day in lecture and he stinks. And you're like, well, I don't want to be rude. And I think in Canada, we have this issue where like we don't want to be rude to people. And I think it degrades the amount of honesty that we're able to have. And I think actually that's one of the things in Europe that you really notice really fast is like how brutally honest people are. And I appreciate it so much because you don't really want to waste people's time. So I think if you can have the first conversation and it can be something small, but it's something that it's like off the court as well. Like you build into having these conversations and sometimes it's not going to go well. And like, that's fine. But I think when you start to look at the world in a way of like, I want to say what I mean and mean what I say. And for example, if I'm going to be doing something ahead of time that I know is going to be pretty like not controversial, but it's going to ruffle some feathers. For example, I'll talk to someone whose opinion I take very highly. For example, Brett Walsh. Sometimes if I'm going to be doing something, I'm like, hey man, do you think that this is a wild conversation to have or a thing to do? And it's usually those pre-planned ones are the ones that you know in your heart or in your soul, the things that you need to be sharing with teammates or things you need to be discussing with your partners or your friends, whatever it is. And I think if you get a second opinion and someone's like, yeah, man, like you really want to you don't want to erode your friendship. Like if you're hiding something from your friend, like every time they do this, it really bothers you. Eventually, you're just not going to be friends anymore. And that's going to be sad for everybody, you know? Or if you have one conversation up front you can really do something about it. So Radical Candor, and then another book, really short book, changed my entire life, is called Lying by Sam Harris. I've probably listened to this book about 7 times on Audible. It makes the case obviously against lying, but it it really gives a healthy perspective on what the benefits of the truth can be and what information people can take from that, you know? And I think, yeah, being truthful is something that's not always been my MO. And it's really something I've tried to cultivate. And then that also helps me with teammates. So I hope
Mm.
some of that can help.
I love that. It's so interesting too because I love when people are honest with me. Like it's so refreshing and I
Yeah.
feel that I have the ability to take the information and disassociate the emotional response from it and just like take the information as it is. Um, but I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like a because I don't like you said being rude or like hurting someone's feelings, putting someone down. Like I think I'm somewhat aware of that. But it's honestly kind of like you're saying, it's like way more of a disservice to them,
Let
sugarcoating
me
it and not letting it get to
Yeah,
that
let me
point.
give you a different way to describe it. If you were to come up to me and say, "Hey, Steve, um, I just want to talk to you a bit because I really like you and I really like you as my teammate. Um, but every single time when I make a mistake, you throw up your hands and get really frustrated. And you know, sometimes it doesn't bother me, but sometimes when it's in intense moments, it really frustrates me. It makes me not want to talk to you. Um, I really like you as a friend, and I just don't want it to be this way. So do you mind not doing that? Now, there's 2 ways I can take that. Hey, TS really likes me as a friend, and I'm doing this and I'm bothering him. And is this a behavior I actually like? If TS did this to me, would I like that? Probably not. Maybe I can change something about that. Or TS, I don't care. Like, but like those are the things where if you weed out all the other likely realities, I think logically a lot of people would be like, oh yeah, I didn't even realize I was doing that. I'm sorry. That sucks. And then I think if you're prefacing with like you care about the person, you're prefacing with, hey, this is kind of what is making me feel. And a lot of people don't want to bother you anyways. So I think there's a lot of good that could come from it. Um, but like I said, I think just your approach matters. And if there's ways to say things that are like you don't have to intentionally put someone down. And I don't try and do that, but sometimes, as you can imagine, my personality is a bit intense. Sometimes that does happen, and that's just, in my opinion, a cost of doing business at a high performance level.
Yeah. Yeah, fair. And yeah, I think the thing with when you would talk to me, I knew you had my best interest in mind. And I think you had built a trust in me beforehand by, taking me out for dinners and stuff. And I knew that you believed in me. What you were telling me was not to put me down, but to actually build me up. And I was able to obviously feel that through all those conversations.
I think the last thing I would say is because you guys had brought it up before, not to belabor this point, but there was also a reason why I took you guys out for dinner. And maybe you guys weren't always aware of this, but I knew I'd probably be kind of shitting on you guys at some point. And this is going to sound bad, but that was a preemptive move on my behalf of also being like, you can't look back and be like, oh, this guy's a jerk. He doesn't care about me. This guy was the same guy who took me for dinner and gave open season on whatever I wanted to know. Like, and I think it's little moments like that where if you have the ability to build some rapport, then you have a sphere of influence that you can use. Now, if I'm just ragging on you every single day, okay, then you use it up really quickly. But if you say one pointed thing every once in a while, like, hey, when you're doing this, you do that, and that's not helpful for the team, or this is an error you keep making, take some time to think about it and look at it. How can you not keep doing that? you also realize like I don't want to be spending time in negative situations ragging on people. No one really enjoys that. So it's like this person took the time out of their day to kind of come to all these conclusions. And this is all back into self-awareness. Like if you have that awareness that people are trying to help you, then if you come to a bad conclusion, like that's just kind of on you.
I I think people often get close teams and unified teams confused, and I don't think they're synonymous, right? Like you and Brett are obviously very close, and if you guys were on a close team, he would say whatever to you, you'd say, yeah, okay, let's go for beers and laugh it off and move on. But because it's such a unified team, you can learn from those conversations, and you know, and he knows that whatever is said is to better the team and better those around them, right? Whereas close teams don't learn from it. They have those experiences, but we're best buddies, so who cares? But those unified teams always come back to the goal, and they always come back to the task at hand and use the setbacks, because there's going to be setbacks. There's going to be drama. There's going to be guys you don't like, but you use that to propel the program forward. And I think that's why that's a great example with you and Brett, because you guys you've been unified for so long through junior team, B team, A team. You both know what the common goal is of each other. You know what the common goal of the program is, and he feels the freedom to come to you, and he knows that you're going to accept that because he knows that you have his best interest at heart.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of great things with that. And I think the first one is just really doing what you say you're gonna, like if you're saying you want to be improving a ton at this skill and doing your best and you're not doing the actual thing, then it's you easily open yourself up for people to just be like, hey, you said you were doing this, you're clearly not doing it. What's going on? Like, have you changed your mind or you just, and it just leaves that question hanging in the air. And I think that's sometimes a good thing. But one of the other teams that is really special is the 2008 team who won gold for the US. That team, as I've heard, is one of the most combative teams in training, of just going at each other, like aggressive, like not like very unlike volleyball today in North America, but one of the most unified teams like that. If every day is you going to war against guys, sometimes you like a lot of guys you don't like. And that can create a lot of that intense moment that you were kind of talking about, Tias. It's like we're all unified because we're all trying to make that Olympic spot. We're all trying to win gold. And if you're not doing what we said we were going to do, then you're not one of us. And it's just, you kind of start to realize like those moments create a little bit of tension, a little bit of intensity. And, like you're performing under that intensity every single day then. And it's not as intense as the big game, but I'm sure as you guys can realize, like, especially with your careers, like burnout is real because like every single day, if you got to be on every single day and like not an easy day, like just a pass serve where someone's talking shit to you when they ace you, like that changes everything. Then your pass serve is not just a walk in the park anymore. It's like, all right, like let's go. And I think when you can start to realize like those little things, those are what can rack up the intensity and rack up like the team unified goal. Because some people are doing that because they want to put you under pressure. And if you're one of those people, like it's sometimes tough.
How do you create that unified culture? Like, I'll give you an example. Like, we have 40% of the team bought in, and the other 60 is upset with the coaching decisions or the president or playing time or practice structure. And like, I think it's more common, obviously, overseas, because like you said earlier, like the club, university, national team, it's very clear what the objective is. How do
Yeah.
you create that in a professional setting? Or can you, or have you tried?
Um, you need one thing to unify everybody that gets everybody on the same page, and you need to eliminate any straying from that. So imagine Imagine you had a coach that nobody liked, but that's a unifying thing for everybody to have that coach. And
Hmm.
everybody can have the little jokes, everybody can have a little thing. And then you can all sit down because you're all on the same page and be like, well, I know this guy sucks, but like we got a big game coming up. We got a great team. Like, let's just go and do it. And the more you kind of lean into something, someone else, something being a unifying factor, you have a level one common ground to start on. And then you kind of have to look at it, man. In reality, there's going to be 3 or 4 big voices in the room that you have to have on your team. And if some of them are going the wrong way, then you're going to have to assume that a couple of the other people who aren't saying anything, who look to that person, will probably go the wrong way as well. So, if you can get some of those respected guys, if you can get some of the experienced guys or the leading guys, if you can get them on your team and kind of corral them in the same direction, then you're probably at a level 2. Now you've got a unifying thing. Now you've got all the big voices on the same page. And then you kind of got to make it your own. You got to have probably what the goal is. And that's got to be your level 3. Like we can, hey, like I believe in this, you believe in this. Let's like we can do this thing. And these are actual conversations you need to have, not just assume that people know or care. But what I will tell you is it's extremely taxing to do that. So you better really want to do it because it can't, if you're the person who's initiating it, and I know you're the captain on your team in pro right now, right?
No, not on this team.
Okay, you were last year?
Yeah.
Okay. If you're trying to do that, then every day that means you have to be on because you're trying to change a culture. You're trying to change and create a level of ethos, a level of belief. And that means praising things that are going towards that and snuffing things out that are taking away from that. And that means you're watching training. You're you're maybe sending clips of training to some of your buddies who don't want to receive your message, don't want to be looking at training. And you're like, hey man, you did exactly what we were talking about. That's amazing. Good for you.
Hmm.
And then they know you're watching training. And then they're like, huh, I did do that thing. Thanks.
Right.
Like everybody loves getting told they're doing a good job. Oh, great. Oh, awesome. Thanks. And then, but it's literally like it is corralling and keeping people online because not everybody's going to want, for example, to go to the finals as much as you do. A lot of people are like, oh, well, I'll tell you a story. Last year, I had a guy on my team who was counting down the days until the season was over because he missed home. He was Italian. His home was an hour a minute. It was an hour and 10 minutes from the gym. Hour and 10 minutes. I was screaming at him in his head, like, what are you talking about? And like, but like one of those moments, like had to snuff that out. Walked up, screaming in my gym, who the like put this up on the board? Like days until we're done. Because you're not playing. Like we're potentially going to the finals. This club, like you've never been to the finals in your entire career, and you have the audacity to put that on the board. That's gotta get destroyed.
Hmm.
Snuff that out right away. But like he's thinking about summer. He's thinking about what am I doing? Why I want to see my family. So do I.
Yeah.
But like that's not what we signed up for here, you know. And I think now you can kind of start to see like that little bit of a darker side of me that maybe is a bit different. But like I think I think once you kind of all accept it and buy into the same thing, then you can all hold each other accountable at the same thing. And you got to be ready that people will also hold you accountable to it and not in a productive way. Like, oh, you
Hmm.
said you're gonna do that, but you didn't do that today, did you? And then like
Right.
kind of the smart little smile. And you realize like, yeah, you're right. I was off today. And now I just took a little step backwards.
Hmm.
And it's hard. It is really
It's
hard.
hard. But like you said, like you said, maybe you saw a dark part of me, but that's like high performance desire to be great. And it's hard to build that desire in other people, right? Like you said, this guy didn't want to go to the finals. And that's not
Yeah.
really up to you to instill in him if he doesn't want to. Right? So that's where
Exactly.
it becomes really hard.
Yeah, and yeah, there's really not much. It's really not, in my opinion, there's not much like if that's a reality that you're dealing with. To me, those are voices I don't even encourage. Like I don't accept. And I like if I'm really honest, I will try and snuff out every single thing you say.
Mm.
Like, and I will just make it like that'll make it uncomfortable for you. And like that's that same part of that brutal honesty that we were talking about is like, and I will tell you honestly, like I think that you're a cancer,
Mm.
and most people like don't like hearing that, and that can actually be something.
Really?
Well, that can be something that changes it for people. They can realize like, hey man, what you're doing is brutal for this team. Like, what do you
Yeah.
like? Why are you doing that? And then, if you want, you could take the time to listen why they miss home an hour and 10 minutes away, and they can obviously go there any single time they want to, which makes absolutely zero sense to me. But you can imagine I'm over this. So I just made my peace with it.
Oh, that's funny.
It's cool though.
Uh,
That is that kind of your, let's say, framework for leadership? Kind of everything that you just went through there with the common ground and the finding the voices, directing it at a common goal, snuffing out the anything that's not related to that.
um, I like if I was to be brutally honest with you, I don't want to ever be a captain on a team because I think my personality is a bit too volatile. And I think you both have seen that like in the gym. You know, that's probably not the calming, reassuring, like this is the guy who's like always at this level emotionally that we want, you know? But I really like my position as like number two or three. I find that to be fun because you can be a little off the walls at times, but you're still driving the thing the right way it needs to go. Um, I think giving space for people to be who they really are and making people feel comfortable with that and realizing like there's certain guys on like for example on our stream I don't really connect with at all. And I just try and maintain enough of a connection. Like if you're talking to me and you really like imagine you really like comic books. I don't like comic books, but I will listen and maybe if I see something, let's say on Instagram or I see something here, I'll bring it up to you. Like, hey, I'm listening. I listen to what you say when you give time to share like something that's important to you personally. But I don't do that freely because I also want to know that like, hey, like I care about you, but then if it's something in the training, like don't think that I hate you for why I get frustrated with you and like well, let's talk about this. And I really appreciate also when people come to me. Um and I think it happens honestly, I'd say it happens about the same amount that I go to other people just based on my personality. Like um, I can obviously make people sometimes uncomfortable, and I have a boisterous personality in that intense way in a gym. And I've had people come to me like, "Hey, you make me feel like sometimes when you're too demanding in training." And I'm like, "Okay, let's break that down. Like, can you explain to me like how this works, how this feels?" And like when people have that honesty back to you, then you can start to see like they care about you too. They care about your relationship. And I think that's like probably the best thing in terms of a leadership type thing is like service leadership. Like you're trying to maintain friendships and to unify the group in a certain way. And the means in which you do all those things are personal to the individuals you have on the team. But I think having like a second eye towards that is a really important thing because those things matter. And sometimes you're the one who actually needs to pick me up, and it's one of your buddies who's been paying attention to you that actually is able to give you what you need. And they probably don't even know how valuable it is to you when they say it to you. Um, Yeah.
No, that's really, really cool because it's about character, right? It's leading with character and being your own character that you're comfortable in. Actually, hold on, let me find this. I was reading my notes from a book called The Captain Class. Here, the most crucial ingredient in a team that achieves and sustains historic greatness is the characters of the players who lead it. I thought that's exactly what you're talking about.
It's funny to me, like you say that, because one of the things that TSU said to me was you might be able to impact volleyball more as a coach than as a player. And when you said that to me, it really kind of struck a nerve with me because I was like, oh, that makes sense. Because I'm like, you actually can instill values on people and show why those values matter. And you can live out your character and people can see like that's on display for all to see. And you're never going to know how that impacts anyone else. But like as an athlete and as a younger guy, you probably know of one or two moments with someone else as an older athlete, as a coach, as a mentor, as whatever, that changed how you see things, that changed how you like move through the world, that changed how you move through life as a player as well. And that's all derived on character. And I think like that's the lasting impact that you will always be able to ensue. It's like how great you were as a player. That's a lot out of your control, to be totally honest with you. Like you got to be born, like, for example, look in the mirror. Incredible player. He's never going to have as many gold medals as like people who are half his level of player at Olympics, at major important tournaments. But he will be remembered as an incredibly gifted player. Also because he made a choice. He changed completely roles. He rolled the dice on himself. Like that to me is bananas. And like that was an individual choice that someone chose to do. Maybe inspired someone like yourself. Like he's got no idea. He doesn't know anything about that. He's just continuing to play. But like the character things are things to me that are quite eternal. So that's pretty cool.
I think it comes down to like the impact versus the accolades. Like I think I spent a lot of my career chasing after the accolades. And that's why I got into so much trouble with my head is I was chasing this accolade of becoming an Olympian one day. And I was sacrificing like a lot to get there and like things that were reasonable, like being away from home and missing certain things, being disciplined, eating well, lifting heavy. And then I started sacrificing like my health for that as
Yeah.
well. I was giving everything to that. But then it's a couple of years ago at one of our athletic banquets at Trinity, our athletic director brought up this idea, and it's like no one in this room could tell me who the MVP of nationals was in 1982, let's say. But you remember the impact that your fourth grade teacher had on you when they believed in you when you were struggling and they took the time to care for you. And I think it's so true. Like I don't care that you're a multi-time Olympian. What I care about is the fact that you took the time to be honest with me and to guide me down my journey. And so I think thinking about the ways that you're impacting people and you like you're saying, you might never know, but just having an awareness that truly changes lives more than anything you could ever win or do for yourself.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. I wanted to share actually one little piece of information that really helped to guide a lot of the principles that I kind of worked through as I was growing up, because that was something that really helped me and something that you had kind of touched on, and something that we've touched on throughout this whole piece is the concept of like an energy pie of like if you want to achieve a 1% or 2% increase at, let's say, something to do with volleyball, that 1 or 2% of effort, of sacrifice, of discipline sacrifice has to come from somewhere else. And that's when you start to get meticulous enough with your development, with your nutrition, with your technical skills, with your tactical understanding of the game, with watching video, watching other people's video, watching. It's all going to come from somewhere. And maybe that means cutting out a little bit here, or cutting out a little bit there. But then slowly you're left with, do I go play junior team, or do I go to my family reunion this year? And then you slowly realize, well, I can't do both. And then it goes, well, I think I can be on the B team this year, but my brother's having a baby. Do I miss the first 2 months of that baby's life for this? And those compound, sadly, in more and more things as you get older, and more as you're trying to get better. Like, do I think I've kind of pulled back a little bit from this, like I was saying about my like day of a game or something like that. But you start to realize, like, as you're chasing these dreams, as you're chasing like what you see as the horizon of your own success, like, you have to give more and more and more of yourself. And I think when you start to realize that, then you start to have a question of, like, do you want to be the best player in the world? I don't care if I'm the best player in the world anymore. Like, I never said I wanted that personally, because I know already when I was younger, I wasn't willing to give everything it would require to be there. And I think things like that are something that a liberating thing as well. Like, if I want to go and be a great professional athlete, and I want to enjoy my time, and I want to enjoy my career, I want to play great along the way. But then you can liberate yourself from a lot of the guilt of, like, oh, should I have been doing this? Or Steve said he was doing that, or this guy said he was doing this. Well, I'm not the same as these people, you know? And I think a lot of that for guys who are coming up in university, and I know some guys who won a bunch of gold medals at Trinity. They ended their careers there. They could have been great national team players, could have been great professional players, maybe Olympians, and they chose not to, you know. And those guys just had different goals and different willingness to sacrifice. So I think just understanding and identifying your goals early, and really being honest with yourself and reflective enough to sit with them and, like, is this really what I want to do? And if it is, then you have that conviction and you have that honesty, and then you're free to go and chase those. And if you're not, no one who really loves you and, like, knows you personally cares if you become an Olympian or you don't. Like, my grandma doesn't care. Doesn't care. She's proud of me, but if I hadn't gone, she would love me the same. My girlfriend loved me the same. Doesn't matter, you know. So, yeah.
Speaking of your grandma, isn't there a story where you took a jersey off of her in the middle of a game because your other one was wet or something?
Yeah, we were playing. I think we were playing the first Cuba game a couple of years ago in Ottawa. We were playing in red, and we were going into the fifth set, and I was drenched, like full, like jumped in a swimming pool tarp, second jersey, didn't have another one. And I look up, my grandma's up there cheering, and she's got one of my red jerseys on. I go, pointed at her, I was like, you give me that jersey. And my grandma laughs at this story still. She's incredible. Like, my grandma laughs at this story because, like, my mom's got a white one, my dad's got a black. My grandma just happened to have she didn't have a shirt under, so she gets someone's jacket. She tosses the jersey down to me. Oh, we won that game, but man,
And it was like an older jersey too, right? Like, if it would
no,
be
it was the same.
noticed, like, oh, it was the
No,
same.
it was the same. It was the same. Yeah.
That's funny.
Oh, I'm dialed in.
That's funny. Well, we're running a little long here, but um, I know Tias has a couple questions that he always likes to end the episodes on, but I'm just curious. I think you're starting to touch on it. But I want to just talk about your decision to leave the national team and what went into that decision. I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision.
Yeah.
But if you wouldn't mind sharing that with us a little bit, I'd really like to hear about it.
There's three parts to the decision. Probably a bit more, but I'll start with that. The first one is my body. I played a lot of games, played a lot of consecutive VNLs, played a lot of sets in those VNLs, and the past couple of years, especially with all the coaching changes and everything, like it, and trying to keep the team, like I viewed it as a failure of my own to the older generation and to the program. If when I was at my peak, I let the team get relegated. And I know that's a lot of like personal ownership. It's like, oh, you're so self-centered. It's like, no, like it was my time where I was one of the, like, you're generally at your best from like, let's say 28 to 30, generally. When you are physically fit enough and you have enough experience to be playing your best ball. And when I was at that time, I was one of the guys who was supposed to, like, be righting the ship and keeping the ship there. And I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I have cartilage cracks in two parts in my one leg. And there are some things you can work your way out of and some things you can't. So that was a large one. Two, it it the team has changed a lot. And I know it kind of feels I needed to take some time away to understand why I was playing. And if it's because I had to play, or I felt like I owed the team something to play, or is I really love playing. And I think in some respect, I think it's time for some other people to get their time to really go and play and do their best and maybe build something without me. And I think that's a good thing. Um, I think if there was a moment where the team was struggling really, and I don't know if I would come back to help. Um, or they would want me to come back to help. I don't really know that. But as of right now, I just don't really feel the desire to start something new again when everything else kind of weighed on me a lot. The last thing is my girlfriend and I are expecting a baby this summer.
Whoa,
Yeah,
congratulations.
thank you.
Wow. Do you want
So
us to keep that in
What?
here?
no, you guys can keep that in. Yeah.
Wow.
I told her, yeah, man.
The
We just
big
went on
announcement
about,
on the Pit to
Dude.
Pro podcast. Let's go. Congrats,
Hell
dude.
Chucky.
yeah.
Thanks,
Hell
Congrats.
yeah.
guys. We
Congrats.
just went on about radical honesty, so why not?
That's awesome.
Um,
So you are for sure thinking about 60% strength and conditioning already.
oh yeah. No, but we're gonna have a little girl in July.
Oh,
So
beautiful.
so
Beautiful.
maybe not 60%. We don't want an absolute monster troll out there. We should maybe dial it down to 40%.
Yeah.
Girls volleyball, she's gotta be a bit more technical,
Yeah, get the skills
40%
going.
technical. Yeah.
That's
Good.
so funny. Dude, that's awesome. You're going to be a great dad.
Thank you guys. Yeah, so we're pumped. We're super excited, but that was like kind of like I wasn't sure, and then like that hit, and I was like, oh, right. Well,
Yeah.
that answers everything for
Made
me.
the decision easy. Well, Steve, I just want to say how much I appreciate the time and energy you put into us and to TS and into the program, and you're going to be dearly missed for sure. All
Thanks, man.
those screaming matches and stuff will be extremely missed, and you've done more for me and Tias and all the young guys than you probably know, like we talked about. So just wanted you to know that.
Thanks, guys. It's
Same here.
it's fun to be kind of seeing it on the other side. Like it's cool because like I said, I've listened to a ton of your podcasts, and it's cool to kind of also like I view it as like I love to like nitpick like what other people think too, and like I've learned a ton from some of the questions you guys have asked, and it's pretty cool to watch you guys like from when I first met you to like the men you are now and the questions you'll ask now, and also from the beginning of this podcast to like where you're at now. Some of there's like self-reflection and the questions and the depth that you're able to kind of bring out of the people that you're talking to, the people that I know that it's like not easy to bring that depth of them.
Hmm.
So yeah, I got to commend you for that. I think you guys are doing something cool to make volleyball a bit more accessible to younger guys. And I think some of those things are just resources like if you were young, you would have eaten that up. So yeah, I hope I hope I can do anything to help you guys continue out to do what you're doing. It's
No,
cool.
this
thanks.
conversation has been incredible.
Might be our best yet.
I
Might be our
was
best
thinking
yet.
the same thing.
Yeah.
I was thinking the same
Guys,
thing.
don't say that. Don't
It's
say
it's the
that,
dad
guys.
energy.
Yeah.
It's the dad energy.
Yeah. That's funny.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, so I have one last question. Yeah, go ahead.
You guys, you got to do me a favor though. You got to do one thing. You guys need to get out with a book list. You guys got to get all
Dude,
your
we did.
guests. Oh, you did? Okay.
Oh, not with our guests. That's a really
Ooh,
good idea.
Good idea.
Dude,
But dude, I just launched a website 3 days ago actually, and I
Okay.
started a blog. There's a section of I started a blog, and then TS's section is like a book nook thing of all the books he talks about and all the books he's read.
nice. Dude,
Okay, but Steve, that's a good
gotta be
idea.
one.
Like a book
That's a
suggestion, you're
fantastic idea.
saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
From each guest?
one from each guest, like one book that meant something. I'll start here
Nice.
for you. I'll give you one.
Yeah, done deal. The Liar? Is that one?
No. Those
Oh.
are bonuses for people who are cruising through the whole episode.
Okay.
Re-listening to this book on Audible, amazing book. You guys will both love this book. I've suggested this a ton to people that I know, and it's like it's nitty-gritty too. So if you're going through it, give it some time. It's called The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin, and it is chess world champion to Tai Chi push hands world champion to jiu-jitsu black belt to mental coach for the Boston Celtics. Like amazing guy. Amazing how he processes learning information and everything under that sun. Amazing. Like you guys are gonna love it. So first book recommendation, get it in there. Anyone who's young,
what a great idea.
enjoy it.
Okay, let's go.
And that's going to be on the website. So everyone, go check out the website.
Yeah, look at the website.
Dial in, boys.
Yeah, sweet. I listened to that one, Chuck, when you recommended you recommended that to me like maybe a year ago now.
Yeah.
I listened to it, blew my mind.
Yeah.
Like
Wow.
it's definitely one where you need to take it like little parts at a time because the depth of how he processes learning and improvement and stuff is like I didn't even know it was possible to think about something that deep.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's like you're on level 1, he's on level 5, and he's trying to dial it down to level 3 so he can explain it to you.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Good. Glad you enjoyed that.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Okay. Man, okay, I had a thought though when you were speaking earlier about the energy and how it has to come from somewhere and it becomes more and more. And one of the things that Dan Lewis actually taught me was like setting a time frame for your commitment to certain decisions. And I'm wondering if that's something that you also feel could be valuable in that kind of situation, because it's a big task to commit your life, let's say, or the next 15 years of your life to that pursuit. But in your example, when things didn't go well in China, you committed everything you possibly had for, would you say, 4 months? And you said you probably wouldn't be able to sustain that over that amount of time. So I'm just wondering if that's something that you've used, is committing to a process or a level of commitment for a time period and then reevaluating.
I've heard Dan talk about the same thing. And I remember when he talked about it, I was like, oh, that's a great way to eliminate all that negative procrastination time that you waste second guessing things, or maybe I should alter the plan a bit like this, or maybe I should do that, or and you spend so much time spinning your wheels thinking about doing the thing as opposed to doing the thing. And I think that's a great way to look at it. I personally have not, but that's something that I'm not incredibly strong at, and something I'm trying to cultivate myself. So I appreciate you bringing that back up to me. Um, in terms of my, I guess the thing that's strange about me is when I watch the Olympics, when I watch Vancouver Olympics in Canada, I had the conviction that that was what I wanted to do, and that was going to be what I was going to be great at. Is going to the Olympics, and I had enough things to buy into in terms of athletic pursuit. Like I had the sport, I knew genetically I would be kind of in the picture, and then you kind of you can start to deduce everything back down. Like you can deduce, okay, where are the guys on the national team? Where did they go to university? Okay, then you can deduce it all down, all the way back down. Like how did they build their career? Like how did they build this out? You know? So I think what I said a bit earlier is kind of going to tie into that. Is like, I think you should look at the game and look at the life and look at what you're willing to live with, and what you're willing to commit to, and then to then go after that. Now, I think having a set timeline, I think maybe that's a helpful thing. I personally subscribe a bit more to the hard-headedness of like, I don't want the out. There was never an out for me personally. Like it was like, "Oh, it's gotta work. It's the only thing that can work. So this has gotta work." And that when I was younger, it came from a bit more of a negative place of like, this is what I need to be successful. And I had that in my phone, like as a daily alarm, like to be successful is to be an Olympian. And like that would go off every single day for years. And it was like, okay, but then you're also reminding yourself, like, if this doesn't work out, something kind of outside of your control, like your life was not successful. So pick and choose your goals wisely. I would say pick and choose your conviction extremely wisely, because then that's going to drive everything that you choose to do. And probably at the end of the day will be a huge contributing factor to the person you become. And you'll, at least in that respect, it's a nice thing because you get to kind of choose who you become, as opposed to if you're just on autopilot, you'll just end up as someone who's a mix of the five people that you averagely spend your time with.
There you go. Love that. All right. Last question. I'm actually really curious what your answer is here, because I have a belief that everyone you talk to is an expert in something. And whether it be like a mindset or an actual act, or it could be anything really. Um, but I think that's like the coolest thing to learn from people is what they've mastered or just being them. And so I'm wondering, it's a tough question, but I'm wondering if there's something that you believe you're an expert in.
It's I'm going to give you a caveat answer because I don't have one.
Mhm.
Um, and the caveat is because I know who's better than me. So that's already tough.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah, that's fun. There's multiple experts on every topic.
so Blair Ban is going to be the guy who's better than me. But one of my favorite players to ever play with was Blair, because his feeling and his flow of energy. And energy is something that I love. I love to cultivate the energy, intense energy, angry energy, sad energy, whatever it is. And personally, I feel like like I said, I live very much on the full emotional spectrum, and that's part of how I play. And I have tried to withhold that and pull that out of my game, and that's not optimal performance state for me. So what I've gotten quite good at is monitoring the energy of my team and trying to see how people react to energy and what can provide an optimal performance state for people around me. And that is also something that I use to kind of get out of my own head and kind of get myself into a flow state, get myself into a game. Is I'm trying to kind of that like kind of rising tide of like fun, intense, positive energy on a team. And you kind of like, oh man, like everybody's getting digs, people are covering, people are talking, people are laughing, people are having that intense training session. I want as much of that as I can possibly get. And that is something that I really try to cultivate in myself and to cultivate awareness to be around people and to bring that out of people as much as I can. So I guess team energy would probably be something that I do. And it's also, to be brutally honest, it's something that I also am bad at sometimes. And it's something that's like also pulls me out of the moment if I have a moment of like frustration or something, and I can see myself take away from it as well. So it's not I'm like, oh, I'm just a great energy guy. No, but I just have an awareness for it and something that I look for, and it's something that's important to me. So yeah.
Cool. Love that.
Yeah,
Alrighty.
that was fantastic.
I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks for coming on, Steve. That was unreal.
Thanks, boys. It's great to see you guys.
Well, Steve, man, I learned so much talking to you today, and I really appreciate your honesty and your willingness to share again
Thanks, guys.
from so far away. And it was a really, really special episode. I think people are really gonna take a lot away from what you had to say.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Alrighty. I think that wraps up episode number 31 of the Pit to Pro podcast. Thanks everyone for listening and signing off.